A crowded 747 has disappeared over the Atlantic.
Air India's not showing up.
Pieces are found scattered on the ocean's surface. But the vital clues are deeper than any air crash investigation has ever gone.
In this accident, we had nothing.
It was just mind-boggling.
An international recovery effort goes to the very bottom of the sea to rebuild the shattered plane. What they discover will send shockwaves around the world. Early morning, June the 23rd, 1985. A 747 flies across the Atlantic Ocean, 9.5 kilometers above the water. The jumbo jet is nicknamed Kanishka, after an Indian emperor. And Air India promises passengers it will be a palace in the sky.
Indian hospitality is something that the culture prides itself on, and you do experience that when you fly Air India. The colors are rich and warm inside. It's your gateway to India.
On its way from Canada, the plane is heading to London, England, before continuing on to New Delhi. It's been in the air for 4.5 hours. Captain Hansay Narendra is a veteran Air India pilot. Satwinder Binder is a captain too, who's serving as first officer on the flight. As the plane nears land, Binder talks with the flight's purser.
Yes, sir?
Inshah, do me a small favor. At the back of the plane, seat 54, a boy is sitting there. He just wanted to have a look in the cockpit.
Can I send him now?
After about 15 to 20 minutes.
There are 329 people on board, including passengers and crew. Many of them are flying to India to visit family or friends. Vishnu Pada is traveling to India with his 2 daughters. Their mother, Lata, is already waiting for them there.
We had decided that it would be the ideal year to take an extended vacation in India as a family.
6 minutes after 8 in the morning, co-pilot Binder makes radio contact with air traffic control in Ireland.
Shanwick, Air India 182, good morning.
Station calling Shannon. Go ahead again, please.
Thomas Lane and Michael Quinn are working at the Shannon Control Center.
Air India 182 is 51 north, 15 west at level 310. Estimate FIR at 0735.
Air India 182, Shannon, roger.
Cleared for London. Flight level
310.
Air India 182 is cleared to London. Maintain 310.
You want to come up front now?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go.
It's a light morning at Shannon Control. They're dealing with just 3 planes. But something peculiar has happened.
The signals are all jumbled up.
The signals on radar merged so that it was totally impossible to read the call signs and flight levels of any of the 3 aircraft.
The Air India 747 is flying at 31,000 feet. A TWA jet is several thousand feet above it, and a CP flight is 2,000 feet higher. All are traveling east. Because the planes are stacked on top of each other, the signals have merged on the controller's two-dimensional screen.
Tom moved the tracker ball on radar and separated the signals.
Two of the planes reappear on the radar, but the Air India flight has vanished.
Air India's not showing up.
Hold on a minute. Air India 182, do you read?
Air India 182, this is Shannon. Do you read? Over.
It's 8:14 in the morning.
I had a gut feeling. To this day, I don't know why I picked up the phone.
Yes, it's Michael Quinn at Shannon. We have a plane off radar.
Normally, a distress call to search and
Right.
rescue isn't made until a plane has been out of contact for more than 20 minutes. The Air India flight has been missing less than 60 seconds. Several ships in the area begin searching for signs of the plane. Its last known position is some 290 kilometers southwest of Cork. Just 2 hours after the plane disappears, a Canadian-owned cargo ship in the area confirms the worst. The first pieces of wreckage are discovered. Uninflated life rafts are spotted bobbing in the cold Atlantic. Then bodies are seen. It's quickly clear that no one has survived. In India, Lata Pada is waiting for her husband and 2 children to arrive when she hears the news from her brother.
He sat me down and told me that, something terrible had happened. I was just in total shock, and, part of me was trying to digest the information, and part of me was trying to imagine if indeed the worst had happened, how I was going to continue my life without them.
Dozens of bodies arrive in Cork. Many more will follow. Now investigators are faced with the enormous task of finding out how they died and what had caused the crash of Air India Flight 182. "130,000 people live in the city of Cork. Tucked into the southern coast of Ireland, it's long been a vital seaport. On June the 23rd, 1985, a gruesome cargo begins arriving at the city's docks. Just hours after Air India Flight 182 crashes into the sea, bodies and wreckage are brought in by boat. Dr. Cumin Doyle is a pathologist at the Cork Regional Hospital.
The first bodies arrived at 4:45 p.m. on that Sunday afternoon, and at 12 midnight we had 130 bodies.
Doyle and his team will examine the bodies to see if they can find any signs of what caused the crash.
It's an enormous undertaking for everybody involved, the hospital personnel, the police, the Navy, the Army, and pathologists like ourselves, but we just had to get on and do the job.
There are so many autopsies to perform that Doyle moves the work into the building's gym.
We had 3 police people working on each body, photographer, a ballistics expert, and a forensic odontologist. That is a person who examines the teeth, the face, for identification purposes.
In just 4 days, autopsies are performed on 132 victims.
All parts of the body were examined externally in detail, and every detail was noted down. We were looking, of course, for the causes of the fatalities.
Doyle makes a telling discovery. Almost all the victims died in the air.
Only 2 of the bodies showed signs of drowning, which indicated that the others were not breathing when they hit the water.
There's something else that's common to many of the victims. A large number have had their clothes torn off.
Now that was important because if they had no clothes or little clothes, it indicated that they had fallen from 31,000 feet or so where this accident occurred.
Some of the bodies also have signs of so-called flail injuries. These are breaks specific to bones in the hips, shoulders, and other joints. H.S. Kohler is the lead investigator into the Air India disaster. The flail injuries tell him the passengers weren't in the plane when it hit the ocean.
They are caused by tumbling, violent motion of the body in air. And that is the pattern of the injuries when a passenger is thrown out of the aircraft at a high altitude.
The autopsies show that somehow the plane had been ripped apart high above the water. Passengers were thrown into the sky long before the plane crashed.
Based on the injuries, we could only say that the plane had broken up at 31,000 feet. We couldn't say what the cause of the breakup was.
The biggest challenge in this accident was that we had no physical evidence available to us in this accident in terms of wreckage, in terms of passengers, crew, or in terms of eyewitnesses. In this accident, we had nothing.
The most important job of the investigators is to try to find the plane's black boxes. The 2 devices record cockpit conversation and other technical information about the flight of the plane. The recorders have radio beacons which send out a signal at a designated frequency. But it's still a huge task. The boxes are more than 6,500 feet below the surface, and the radio signals last just 30 days. Salim Jiwa is a journalist who has investigated the Air India disaster.
The search for the black boxes was urgent, and 3 countries participated in it: England, Ireland, and India.
But even with such a massive response, early efforts are frustrated.
42 kilohertz. It's too high. It can't be them.
Investigators are picking up radio signals, but they're at the wrong frequency. As the search continues, H.S. Kohler and his team study the maintenance history of the plane. They want to know if an undetected flaw had caused the jet to come apart in flight. They uncover a potentially important piece of information. The Air India jet was flying with 5 engines. A 747 normally has 4 engines, but it can carry more. The plane was designed so that it could transport a malfunctioning engine beneath its wings. Ground crews can mount the engine to a bracket on the plane. It's exactly what happened to the Air India jet.
There was an extra engine that a previous flight had left behind that was mounted on the wing of the aircraft.
The extra engine creates substantial drag on the left side of the plane. If the pilots don't properly compensate, the plane will start turning in that direction.
And this hypothesis continued that there is possibility that this fifth engine might have caused the breakup of the wing.
In fact, investigators discover that before the plane took off for London, the flight engineer noticed problems with the way the engine was attached.
There was a small problem in the fifth engine. I've asked them to fix it up.
All right.
Investigators also learned that some internal parts of the extra engine were taken out and stored in Flight 182's cargo bay. They are so enormous that pieces of the cargo door were removed to make the job easier.
Some of the other parts of the engine went into the rear of the aircraft. Aircraft such as the 747 can handle this quite easily, it's routinely done.
But if the cargo door wasn't reassembled properly, it could have led to an explosive decompression. In 1974, a cargo door blew off a Turkish Airlines flight shortly after it took off from Paris. The sudden decompression crippled the plane. It crashed moments later, killing everyone on board. Kohler must consider two theories. Either problems with the door or with the extra engine itself brought down the plane. If either one had taken place, there should be evidence on the plane's black boxes. Finding the recorders has become increasingly important. Almost 2 weeks after the search begins, investigators get news that helps them pinpoint the location of the black boxes.
The signal will be higher. So this 42 kilohertz could be it. Tell the boats to look again.
The piece of the black box which broadcasts the locator signal is made of ceramic. If it's damaged, the frequency of the signal can change. It means the strange frequency ships detected earlier could be the right one. Both the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder are finally located. But they're so deep, it's difficult to bring them up.
The aircraft was at 6,000 feet below the sea, and it was the depth that was sort of defeating.
A deep-sea submersible is brought in. But even with this specialized vehicle and with the location of the black boxes known, it takes 4 attempts to bring the recorders to the surface.
Estimate FIR at 0735.
Air India 182, Shannon, roger. Cleared for London.
Lead investigator Kohler now has what he hopes are 2 vital pieces of the puzzle.
If there's any problem in the aircraft, the crew will be talking about the problem. They will not be silent about the problem.
But when he listens to the cockpit voice recorder, Kohler hears nothing unusual. After the last contact with air traffic control in Shannon, the voice recorder picks up the crew talking about customs seals.
To seal the bar before the
It's
arrival.
paperwork that has to be completed before landing.
Have not been used. And they want about 30 custom seals.
Customs?
Yeah, custom seals to seal the bar before its arrival.
The conversation ends in mid-sentence.
That was it, and then everything was, of course, silent.
The cockpit voice recorder indicated that there was no abnormality in the cockpit, no emergency. Every conversation was normal.
The plane's flight data recorder tells a similar story. Kohler pours through details about Air India's speed, altitude, and dozens of other pieces of information. The extra engine did cause the plane to bank slightly, and the jet's rudder was turned 11 degrees to the right. But this was exactly what the crew needed to do to offset the drag created by the fifth engine.
We found that all parameters of the aircraft altitude, aircraft heading, aircraft bank attitude, roll attitude, autopilot engaged, everything was working normally till the last point.
After analyzing both black boxes, Kohler can't find any evidence that the plane was in trouble before it suddenly disappeared from radar. But the very lack of evidence does suggest something. Both recorders get their power from the plane's engines. Both stopped at exactly 14 minutes and 1 second after 8 in the morning. Since the recorders stopped working at the same time, the problem on the plane had to be catastrophic enough to sever the jet's electronic system before the crew could react.
Yeah, custom seals to seal the bar before its arrival.
Investigators are becoming convinced that there are only two possible explanations for the crash: a devastating decompression or a bomb. They study the wreckage that's been found floating on the surface of the ocean, but it's just a small percentage of the entire plane. And none of it is helpful to investigators. It offers no clues to explain why the plane crashed.
We knew there was no fire. We knew the aircraft was performing well. Everything was normal. There was no cockpit emergency, no warning. We got elimination of all the things, but we did not got the answer is what happened. To go to the cause of the accident, we had to go to the wreckage which was lying at the bottom of the sea.
But what parts of the plane should investigators focus on? The black boxes were equipped with radio transmitters which made them easier to find. But the debris field is deep underwater and enormous, some 16 kilometers long and 6 kilometers across. How do investigators identify the one clue that will help them unlock the mystery? Roy Truman is an underwater salvage expert. He's brought in to do something that's never been done before: retrieve the ruined pieces of a jumbo jet from the bottom of the ocean. In hundreds of thousands of pieces, he needs to find the ones that will explain why the plane crashed.
Up until that time, we had only been used with recovering small aircraft. Here we're talking about a 747, which was huge, and we had no idea of the size of the pieces and what we were going to find.
Investigators know they can't bring the entire wreck to the surface. It's so deep it takes hours to recover a single piece. The submersible takes underwater video and still photos. Investigators use those to decide which pieces to bring to the surface.
It was a narrow corridor, and at each end of the corridor, it was very light wreckage. All of the heavy stuff, engines, main aircraft structure was in the middle of the wreckage field.
Like searching for a needle in an underwater haystack, investigators hope to discover the cause of the crash in a tangle of ruined metal. But autumn is coming. Soon the weather will turn bad, and they'll have to abandon their search. The key to unlocking the disaster still lies somewhere at the bottom of the ocean. Investigators from India are scouring the ocean floor, trying to find out why Air India Flight 182 fell from the sky. As the work continues in Ireland, there's growing suspicion in Canada that the Air India crash was no accident. As police and investigators sift through the list of passengers on the plane, they find something peculiar. Many of the passengers who were on Air India Flight 182 began their day in Vancouver. They were using another plane to connect to Flight 182. One of the passengers who bought a ticket for that plane never got on.
Well, the passenger, we have never identified him per se, but the ticket identified him as M. Singh. It simply had an initial, but no full name. We believe that name to be was fictitious, and that the person never intended to travel.
While he never boarded the plane, M. Singh did check in.
Next, please. On your way to Toronto?
And I want my bag checked through to Delhi.
Sir, I can't do that. Your reservation is only confirmed to Toronto.
Oh, I am confirmed. This is my ticket.
Jeannie Adams is a ticket agent working for
You are on
Canadian
standby
Pacific.
to Delhi. I can't. Mr. Singh, you are on standby to Delhi. I can't.
But then I have to pick up my bag.
I can't check your bags through to India if you are not confirmed.
But I am indeed confirmed. Wait, I'll get my brother. He'll tell you.
There are as many as 30 people waiting to check
Do
in.
that, sir. Your reservation is only confirmed.
Adams
to
doesn't
Toronto.
have time to wait for the man's brother.
Oh, okay. I'll check it through. But you have to check with Air India when you get to Toronto. Your seat is 10B.
Even though Singh doesn't have a ticket taking him to India, his bag is checked straight through. His luggage is loaded, but no one notices that Singh never boards the plane that leaves Vancouver.
She broke the rules as they were. She should not have allowed that to go through for New Delhi Interline. But she was so bullied and so browbeaten by Mr. Singh in front of everybody else that I think to her eternal sadness and heartbreak, she gave in.
Singh's maroon bag didn't raise any concerns when it was loaded in Vancouver. Since the Air India flight was international, when the bag arrived in Toronto, it faced a more strict series of inspections.
This is what it will sound like.
John D'Souza is a security officer for Air India. The day of the flight, he demonstrated a portable explosives detector for baggage handlers in Toronto. Chemicals in a match triggered the device, as would chemicals used in some explosives.
Okay?
The portable device was put to use because the X-ray machine, which normally scans every piece of luggage, had broken down.
The technology, especially the X-ray technology, were very weak, very in their infancy at that time, and it didn't work reliably. And in the case of the Air India episode, the technology went quite badly wrong, which was one of the tragedies of this situation.
As security workers used the portable explosives wand on the bags, everything seemed normal, until they got to the maroon bag. The bag did trigger the device, but the sound it made was very different from the one workers heard during the demonstration. The bag was passed and allowed on board the plane, eventually flying towards England. Over the Atlantic Ocean, carrying M. Singh's bag. An explosion rips through Tokyo's Narita Airport. 2 baggage handlers are killed. 4 people are injured. A bomb has been hidden inside another piece of luggage that came from Vancouver. Luggage that was bound for another Air India jet.
And it was headed for the cargo hold. When it exploded on the ground, once it was put on, the bag was probably just thumped a little bit, and it exploded as the 2 Japanese baggage handlers were putting it on a conveyor belt.
Just as on Flight 182, one of the bags being moved in Tokyo was checked in by a passenger who never boarded the flight.
There was no X-ray machines in use at Vancouver Airport. There was nothing to stop that bag from flying to Tokyo.
There's a disturbing connection between the Tokyo bombing and the Air India flight. The tickets for the men who checked both bags were bought on the same day by the same customer. The single crash of Air India Flight 182 has suddenly become part of a much larger story. With the apparent connection between the two incidents, investigators in Ireland are extremely interested in what police find in Tokyo. Soon after the bombing, forensic experts descend on Japan's Narita airport. There are traces of evidence everywhere.
The Narita bombing was within a confined space. So unlike the Air India Flight 182 situation, where we had debris scattered over 9 miles under the ocean and pretty hard to retrieve, we had, in a sense, the good fortune of a contained area where an explosive device went off.
Pieces of metal and circuit boards are embedded in the walls. Explosive residue clings to parts of the container that housed the bomb.
Amazingly, Japanese forensic experts were able to pick out tiny parts and fragments, and all the analysis finally led Japanese police to identify the vehicle that was used to carry the bomb.
Experts even find serial numbers on pieces of the wreckage. Clues that show the bomb was hidden inside a specific stereo tuner made by Sanyo. All 2,000 tuners that were ever made were shipped to a warehouse near Vancouver, British Columbia. From there, they were sent to stores across the region. One of those tuners carried the bomb that exploded at Narita. Police have a difficult task trying to trace the sale of 2,000 tuners. They could have been sold to anyone. Most of the stores that had received the tuner had been sold out for years. But police get a break when they ask about the tuner at a store in Duncan, a tiny town on Vancouver Island. The last unit had been sold just a few weeks ago.
They were able to figure out who bought the stereo tuner which contained the bomb.
Police obtained the same sort of tuner that was used to house the bomb on Air India. They conduct tests to see how big the bomb would have to be to create the sort of damage that was found in Tokyo.
There was a progressive experimentation using dynamite to find out the extent of damage particular strands of dynamite would cause.
They match the size of the tuner fragments made after each explosion with the fragments that were found at Narita. They discover that just a few sticks of dynamite were likely used in the Tokyo bomb. But could just 4 sticks of dynamite really bring down a jet? Once they discover just how powerful the Narita bomb was, police place it into a fully loaded luggage container. The devastation is enormous.
Any decompression caused by an event, an explosive device in the luggage hole, would be sufficient to cause catastrophic results for that aircraft. You don't need much. 4 sticks of dynamite can do the job.
The cramped quarters of a cargo hold amplify the power of a bomb. Tests conducted at Penn State University show that the shockwaves created from a bomb blast don't travel in just one direction, but reverberate inside a luggage container, building on each other, vastly increasing the initial force of the explosion. If a bomb had indeed exploded in the cargo hold of Air India, it would have caused enormous amounts of destruction. It's the sort of damage that should have left its mark on the remains of Flight 182. Investigators have a growing suspicion that this plane was brought down by a bomb, but they still have no proof.
So the investigators were not only looking for something that was broken that might have caused the failure, but they were looking for signs of what caused the explosion, such as burning or solvent stains or possibly shrapnel in seats. It meant a lot tighter scrutiny of every piece of wreckage.
We kept on analyzing each photograph. Is it giving any indication of an explosion? Is it giving any impact damage?
Knowing his time is running out, Kola selects a few key pieces of the plane to bring to the surface. Bad weather forces him to leave the rest behind. Kola hopes the bits he does have can prove there was a bomb on board. Each piece that's brought up is carefully mapped to its original position on the jet. One of the most promising sections brought up from the bottom is the floor of the front cargo bay.
When we recovered that item, we found that it had holes which are of a very special nature. Penetration from inside to outside at a very high speed. Curling of the edges of that one. And that was indicative of that perhaps this is the place where the explosion had occurred.
As many as 20 holes are found. In each, the metal is bent outward, like the petals of a flower. These are classic signs of something being blown out from the cargo bay. On the side wall of the cargo bay, investigators find more clues. Additional holes are discovered, like the ones on the floor. These also appear to have been blown out from the cargo hold. A closer study of the ceiling of the cargo bay also indicates that the ribs connecting it to the fuselage were broken by being forced up. Investigators are convinced that the wreckage shows that a bomb had exploded in the forward cargo hold. If the bomb had gone off in the front of the plane, it would explain why the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder cut off so quickly. Like other 747s, the electronics bay on the Air India flight is located below the cockpit. Many of the important electrical systems on the plane run through here. The forward luggage compartment is right beside it.
And so when the bomb went off, the explosion would have taken out the computers completely, and there would have been absolutely dead silence, and that's precisely what happened.
Investigators are convinced that Air India Flight 182 has been destroyed by a bomb. This was no accident. The crash of the passenger jet was a crime.
Nobody thought that such an evil plot of blowing two aircraft simultaneously would occur from Vancouver.
Exhaustive detective work creates a clear picture of what likely happened on board the Air India jet. In Toronto, M. Singh's bag is taken off the Vancouver flight and moved onto the Air India jet. It's put into a luggage container that's eventually placed at the front of the jet, right behind the plane's electronics bay. As the plane sailed over the Atlantic Ocean, the crew had no warning that a bomb was ticking down to disaster.
They want about 30 custom seals.
Customs?
Yeah, custom seals to seal the bar before its arrival.
When the force of the blast hit the floor of the jet, it pushed it violently upwards. The thin fuselage would have been blown apart. The air pressure inside the plane would have rushed out, tearing passengers from the cabin and fatally crippling the jet.
The debris scattered over 9 miles is an indication of how rapidly and how how fearsome this whole decompression was. But in this instance, the aircraft completely didn't stand a chance of flight. There was no way of continuing flight in this case.
As the jet fell towards the sea, the forces put on the fuselage tore it apart.
It would have a tail torn off and the wings would start breaking. And there's no way of sustaining flight after that. It goes into gyrations. Once it goes into gyrations, there was just massive structural failure.
After months of painstaking work, investigators believe they have unraveled the cause of the Air India crash. They've proven a bomb brought the plane down. It's now up to police to find the bombers. But with so many deaths and so many more possible if the Narita bomb had exploded in mid-air, there's immediate interest in making passenger jets safer.
This was one of the biggest disasters in the Indian aviation history. And it could have been avoided if the procedures were in place.
As the hunt for the killers continues, extraordinary steps are taken to tighten security and to see if jets can be made to withstand the force of a bomb. It's May 1997. More than 10 years after a terrorist bomb destroyed Air India Flight 182. An out-of-service 747 is about to take part in a remarkable test. 2 bombs are placed in the front cargo bay. 2 more are put in the back.
Well, the Burning-Thorpe test was actually intended to prove 5 years worth of research, that we can protect an airplane using hardened luggage containers or hardened liners in the cargo hold.
The plane is also pressurized to simulate the conditions a jet would encounter at cruising altitude.
Pressurization is the key to that kind of experiment. The added energy that you have from the pressurization inside the airplane adds to the damage. You can think of it as a balloon. If you take a pin and you put it in a balloon that's uninflated, you get just a simple hole the size of the pin. However, if you blow that balloon up and you hit it with a pin, it pops catastrophically.
When the bombs are detonated, the result is devastating.
The force of the blast plus the pressure inside the jet just tore the plane apart. And that's the closest we can come to seeing what would have happened to a jet in flight.
The destructive power of bombs on the planes is well known. But what the tests at Bruntingthorpe showed was that relatively simple measures can substantially minimize the damage caused by an explosion. One of the bombs in the rear cargo hold was placed in a normal luggage container. But the bombs in the front cargo hold were different. One was placed in a specialized container strengthened with a material similar to that found in bulletproof vests. The other was put in a normal container, but placed beside walls that had been reinforced with a blast-absorbing liner. When the bombs explode, the front of the plane is virtually untouched.
We had no breach of the airplane skin with the liner or with the hardened luggage containers. But towards the rear of the airplane or the tail, where we didn't have any of the hardened materials, it was a catastrophic failure for the airplane.
The standard luggage container did nothing to minimize the blast. Both the protective lining in the front cargo bay and the hardened luggage container were able to absorb the force of the explosion.
It's only speculation, but would steps like these have saved Air India? Very likely. Would they make the industry safer today? Absolutely.
Despite the dramatic results of the tests in Britain, hardened luggage containers are not used by world's airlines. While effective at stopping bombs, they're extremely expensive.
The hardened containers are not in use now because it's just not economically feasible. The containers cost the tens of thousands of dollars just to purchase, and they're very fragile. They're composite materials, so if you run into the side of them with a forklift, they're pretty much useless from that point forward.
There have been significant improvements made to the way that passenger luggage is screened at most international airports. More sophisticated color X-ray systems using multiple scanning beams are now used.
But I am indeed confirmed. Wait, I'll get my brother. He'll tell you.
Oh, okay. I'll check it through. But you have to check with Air India when you get to Toronto.
And there are stricter regulations about luggage getting sent forward on connecting flights.
In the case of Air India, the most important thing of all was passenger baggage reconciliation. This is the key to detecting an explosive device or a terrorist. No plane leaves with baggage unattached to a specific passenger inside that plane. And that must be so.
Your seat is 10B.
I think one of the most difficult piece of news for the families to accept was the many ways in which this tragedy could have been prevented. I mean, it was absolutely unforgivable that a bag could be interlined to another destination without a passenger accompanying it.
The quality of training that security guards at airports get also came under scrutiny during the years after the Air India crash. It's still an area of concern for some security experts.
There's a real failure to train security personnel. And that failure is because you cannot pay rent-a-cops subsistent wages to look after your security when you get on board an aircraft.
In the Air India case, police eventually traced the bombing to Sikh extremists living in Canada. They're fighting to have an independent Sikh homeland created in India. The man who confessed to assembling the bomb is sent to prison. The man suspected of masterminding the plot is killed several years later while under arrest in India. Both men had deep ties to Canada's West Coast Sikh community. It's a connection that still bothers Lata Pada.
It was a deliberate act of terrorism, and hurts even more that they were executed by Canadians on Canadian soil against Canadians.
More than 20 years after the destruction of the Air India flight, the shock of the day is still fresh. And many questions remain unanswered.
We still don't know who the two people were who checked in the bags. Apart from the basics of who made the bomb, we don't know much about who else assisted them. We don't know who picked up those tickets. There's a vow of silence that has hindered the investigation.
This inquiry will be launched immediately.
In 2006, the Canadian government launched an inquiry into the Air India bombing, another investigation of what happened and why. The shocking death of so many is a continuing source of anger and disbelief. No matter what the inquiry finds, the sobering facts are the same. 329 people killed in an instant. There are memorials now in Ireland and Canada, mourning the victims of the Air India crash. Marking the day a terrorist bomb ripped through the lives of so many.
It's just so tragic about all our lives that we lead. Every day is an ordinary day in our lives, but some days, unexpectedly, something completely, totally unexpected shatters your life, and that was one of those moments.
Outside one of India's busiest airports, the early evening sky ignites into a fireball.
This cloud just lit up. Felt like you could feel the heat.
Flaming wreckage falls from the sky. It's a horrifying crash.
I realized that the clumps that I saw all around me were either the remnants of the aircraft or dead bodies.
When investigators arrive, they find the twisted remains of 2 passenger jets. 349 people are dead. Vital clues are buried deep underground. Investigators must piece together the day's events.
Saudi 763 will maintain 140.
Kazakh 1907, now reach 150.
How had 2 crews that should have known each other's positions ended up in the world's deadliest mid-air collision? Indira Gandhi International Airport, New Delhi. A gateway to India. November the 12th, 1996.
Busy?
Air traffic controller VK Dutta arrives for the late afternoon shift.
There was a ward supervisory officer. There was one person who was sitting beside me and he was assisting me. And the things were all normal.
But normal at Indira Gandhi doesn't mean calm. This is becoming one of the most congested airports in the world. In 1990, the government of India signed open skies agreements with several different countries. Those pacts have made it easier for foreign airlines to land at Indian airports. Many airlines are taking advantage of the new policy. Air traffic controllers are now handling more traffic than ever.
The open sky policy acted as a catalyst in the air traffic growth. The volume of traffic grew from, I believe, 175 movement a day to around 225 movement a day.
We have to perform during that time. So whether 10 aircraft come on that time or 20 comes, so you have to handle them.
Just past 6 o'clock, Saudi Arabian Airlines Flight 763 takes off into the sunset.
Gear up. Gear up. Clear on left.
Captain Khalid Al-Shabaili powers the Boeing 747 away from the runway. His co-pilot, Nazir Khan, handles all radio communication. There are 289 passengers on board. Many are Indian workers returning to their jobs in the Middle East.
Saudi 763, airborne 03, contact radar 127.9.
While Flight 763 was on the runway, its movements were tracked and directed by an air traffic controller in the airport's tower.
279, good day.
But shortly after the plane takes off, the tower passes the pilots over to approach controller VK Dutta, who's in another room at the airport. Approach controllers at Indira Gandhi guide planes through the airspace beyond the runways. They're in charge of all arriving and departing flights within 110 kilometers.
The approach controller normally is responsible for arrival and departures of the aircraft which are coming in. They are safely and expeditiously, they are brought to the final approach.
Tonight, Dutta is controlling 5 flights. Some of these are leaving the airport, while others are coming in. His task is to keep those planes spaced safely apart. but not so far apart as to cause any delays.
There's a continuous coordination with the tower who handles the ground traffic. So he would tell approach controller that this fellow is ready, and he is to be accommodated between these two flights. So that kind of dynamics we were doing at that time.
Saudi 763 approaching flight level 100. Roger, climb, flight level 140. Clear to climb 140, Saudi 763.
This evening, a United States Air Force cargo plane is coming in for a landing. Even though it's an Air Force jet, this flight is Dutta's responsibility.
I think we probably had 3 or 4 back and forths with the controller where he was verifying our altitude or checking on our altitude, telling us about other traffic in the vicinity.
Saudi 763 approaching 140 for higher.
Saudi Flight 763 reaches its last assigned altitude of 14,000 feet. The pilots request permission to fly higher.
Roger, maintain flight level 140. Stand by for higher.
In order to coordinate incoming and outgoing traffic, Dutta wants the Saudi flight to stop climbing.
Saudi 763 will maintain 140.
Dutta is concerned with another plane, now flying east for a landing at Indira Gandhi Airport. It's a passenger jet operated by Kazakhstan Airlines. The Ilyushin 76 is a massive Russian plane. Originally built for the military, a modified version is now widely used as a commercial airliner. Dutta wants it to pass over top of the Saudi flight before landing. After that, he'll let the Saudis continue their climb.
They were supposed to cross maintaining 1,000 feet of separation.
Kazakh 1907, now reaching 150. 46 miles from Delta Papa November.
Roger, maintain flight level 150. Identify traffic 12 o'clock reciprocal, Saudi Boeing 747.
Dutta doesn't want the Kazakh flight to be surprised to see the Saudi jet. Since planes don't have radar to track other aircraft, they rely on controllers to warn them about other planes nearby.
Maintaining 150, Kazakh 1907, will report. How many miles?
All pilots tuned to the approach control radio frequency are able to hear one another as they communicate with the ground.
How many miles?
8 miles now.
It was strictly visual and trying to pick up on the radios where everyone else is at and what they're up to.
Traffic is at 8 miles, level 140.
Suddenly, a massive explosion shatters the evening's calm.
All at once, out of the right side of the window, right side of the cockpit, this cloud just lit up.
Those missiles?
To my mind's eye, there were missiles kind of corkscrewing, picking up speed was what they looked like, and they looked like they were coming right at us. We actually started veering the aircraft away before it became apparent that they weren't coming at us.
The Saudi Airlines jet spirals towards the ground.
Delhi, this is 1815. 1815, say again?
Got on the radio right away, called the controller.
We saw something that looks like a big explosion.
Then it struck to me that something has gone wrong.
On Dutta's radar screen, both the Saudi jet and the Kazakh plane have simply vanished.
When I saw other blips are coming in, so I watched the sweep again. But they were not there at all.
We then heard the controller call for the Saudi Air jet and the Ilyushin.
Saudi 763?
With no response. That was obviously very bone-chilling.
Something tragic has happened in the skies near New Delhi's airport. VK Dutta is about to become the target of an investigation into one of the deadliest plane crashes of all time.
Kazakh 1907, report your position.
At New Delhi's airport, a sense of dread is growing. 2 planes have vanished from approach control's radar.
The worst nightmare an air traffic controller has is the Mayday police.
Saudi 763.
Together, the 2 missing planes were carrying 349 people.
Kazakh 1907, report position.
I gave 1 or 2 calls to Kazakh or Saudi.
Saudi 763.
I forward how many kids I have, where my wife is, whom I am related to.
US Air Force pilot Captain Tim Place soon confirms the worst.
Delhi, this is 1815.
1815.
What did you see?
2 distinct fires on the ground.
2 fires on the ground. Confirm?
Confirm. Confirm.
Roger.
My senior came to me, so I told him the accident happened. I told people who were to do search and rescue that the aircraft have crashed at 40 nautical miles west of Delhi.
2 planes have gone down over Charkhi Dadri.
Charkhi Dadri is a town 65 kilometers west of New Delhi. Its mustard and grain fields are now burning with the twisted wreckage of 2 ruined airplanes.
All of a sudden, the sky turned a bright red color, and I saw fire and smoke.
One plane started to come towards us. There was fire and parts of the plane were flying everywhere. People were running. The plane's engine broke off and the plane started to spin out of control and fell into the field.
I was told that there's been a mid-air collision. Apparently there's a jumbo jet which may be involved, and why don't you just head out? There was this adrenaline rush in that sense. I was very new in the business, and I knew I had to get that story.
Vishnu Som is assigned to report on the crash for New Delhi television. He arrives in the darkness of night a few hours after the crash.
We parked our vehicle on the side of the road, and it was, there was a fair bit of moonlight.
He and his cameraman are one of the first media crews to arrive on the scene.
Hey, turn off the light. Don't want to attract attention. Police have likely cordoned off the area.
I stepped onto the field, and I thought it was a fallow field. Nothing was growing over there because it was just sand. Because it was dark and our only visual reference was the moonlight, we just sort of kept going. And then I remember seeing clumps around me, just these little piles on all sides. And because there wasn't enough light, I didn't know what exactly it was. And then I stopped because I said, something's terribly wrong over here.
Turn on your light. Turn on your light.
I realized that the clumps that I saw all around me were either the remnants of the aircraft or dead bodies. There was a tree just maybe 15 feet away from me, to my right. There was this burnt corpse on that tree, and that's an image which comes back and continues to haunt me even after so many years.
As night turns to day, hope of finding any survivors fades. None of the passengers aboard either plane has survived. 349 people are dead. It's the worst mid-air collision of all time. News of the crash spreads around the world.
What remains clear is that there was more than one set of factors that might have resulted in the collision.
We have two very separate wreckage fields.
Captain KPS Nair is one of the first investigators on the scene.
I was aghast, horrified. I can't explain it because I had not seen anything like that before. It is something which I can't explain.
The Kazakh flight and the Saudi Airlines jet have fallen 7 kilometers from each other. Investigators have two separate crash sites to examine, but they know one cause will explain both accidents.
It's unlike a single aircraft falling somewhere. Two large-bodied aircraft colliding each other in the sky. There are different causes.
How had two planes that were supposed to be 1,000 feet apart collided? Investigators consider three possibilities. An error on the part of the air traffic controller, an error by one of the crews, or the failure of an instrument on one of the planes. They hope the mangled wreckage will hold the clues they need. Their first priority is to find the black boxes from both planes. They record cockpit conversations along with critical data about the flight, like its altitude, speed, and heading. Although fire has ravaged the wreck sites, the black boxes from both planes are found on the first day of the investigation. But for the moment, they hold their secrets. It will take several months for experts to extract data from the recorders. In the meantime, investigators focus on conversations between the two planes and the air traffic controller.
In this particular case, we had the evidence of the ATC transcript.
Without onboard radar, the planes around Delhi's airport rely on air traffic controllers to guide them. VK Datta comes under enormous pressure. Did he make mistakes that caused the worst mid-air collision ever?
Those times were bad. These media people, they crowd foul. So I told them that, there was no fault of mine.
Hi, I'm VK Datta. I'm sorry to keep you waiting.
Have a seat.
Investigators want to know everything that Datta did on the night of the crash.
Was traffic heavy?
Evenings are always busy.
Datta's radar doesn't track a plane's altitude. Instead, controllers in New Delhi write a plane's last reported position on a strip of paper. The strips are continually updated. It's the only way for controllers to keep track of the altitude of the planes under their control.
Level information is not there, so level has to be confirmed by the pilot.
Kazakh 1907, now reaching 150.
Air traffic controllers can only know a plane's altitude when the pilots report it.
Are these your notes?
Yes, sir. This is the Kazakh one, and this is the Saudi one.
Investigators learned that Datta was in charge of 5 flights at the time of the accident, and that the Saudi and Kazakh flights were flying in opposite directions of the same aerial pathway. The area that Datta manages is divided into a network of air corridors. Controllers use them to channel flights in and out of the airport. But many of the corridors are used for military flights. In fact, even at such a busy airport, there's only one main corridor for commercial planes. In cases like this, there are strict rules he has to follow.
Between two aircraft, the requirements specify a vertical minimum separation of 1,000 feet.
When aircraft fly through the sky, they leave turbulence in their wake, like boats on the water. It can affect the planes around them. Air traffic controllers deal with this by keeping planes at different altitudes.
Roger, maintain flight level 140, stand by for higher.
Dutta was supposed to ensure that the two planes were 1,000 feet apart as they approached each other. He planned to do what he'd done many times before, have the incoming plane pass 1,000 feet over top of the outbound plane. It was a routine procedure, but somehow the two planes had ended up on a collision course. One of the two planes was not where it should have been. Investigators wonder if Dutta made a mistake that led to the horrific crash. Poring through the ATC transcripts, investigators quickly learned that Dutta had given the two planes the proper directions. But since his radar doesn't display altitude, there was no way for him to tell if the planes followed those instructions. Investigators are so convinced that Dutta did nothing wrong that 3 days after the crash, he's back on duty.
When my family and other people heard this, there was a little sigh of relief that, our guy is safe.
Investigators return to the crash site. They are hoping to recover certain instruments from the two aircraft. Perhaps a mechanical failure had led one of the planes off course.
Normally, the altimeter would have stopped at that point where the accident took place. And we wanted to know what altitude they were registering at the time of the accident.
But the Saudi cockpit has plunged deep into the ground. The accident investigation becomes an excavation.
The Saudis' nose portion was well below the earth. It was about 10 to 12 meters below. The end of the nose had gone that far below. Machines had to be brought in, excavators, to dig up and lift the cockpit of the Saudi aircraft.
The altimeters of the Kazakh flight are easier to find. That plane didn't crash nose first. There's some chance there are clues about its exact altitude at the time of the accident. When they're pulled from the wreckage, investigators discover that there is indeed something strange about the altimeters. Both the captain and the co-pilot have an altimeter in front of them, but in this case, they do not have the same reading.
There was a difference between the two by about 300 feet.
Strange.
Perhaps the conflicting altimeters had led the crew off course. But the difference in readings may simply have been caused by the force of the crash. At this point, investigators don't know.
Mostly there and there, as close as you can get it.
Investigators need to discover which of the two planes was at the wrong altitude. They explore other evidence. The pattern of the damage on the two planes may help answer a critical question.
What was the relative angle between the two aircraft at the time of their contact?
Most of the pieces from the two planes are kilometers apart, but a large section of the tail from the Saudi aircraft is found near the beginning of the debris field. This suggests it was one of the first pieces to come off that plane.
The significant points of contact in this particular accident in the air was between the tail end of the IL-76 and the wing portion of the Boeing 747 of Saudi Air.
The tail of the Kazakh plane appears to have pierced through the left wing of the Saudi jet. If that's the case, the Kazakh flight hadn't been above the Saudi jet when they collided, as air traffic controllers thought. It must have been below it. It's a puzzling discovery that adds to the mystery. Investigators still don't know which plane was in the wrong airspace. What they do know is that once the two planes hit, there was no hope for either crew. After hitting the other plane's wing, the Kazakh plane's tail tore through the horizontal stabilizer at the rear of the Saudi 747. 5.5 meters of it is torn off. Without it, the Saudi crew can't control their plane.
The result is the aircraft goes into uncontrollable spiral. And in this particular case, if I would say both the aircraft had gone into that situation.
What they've found in the wreckage of the two jets frustrates the investigators. They now understand how the planes collided, but they still don't know why they were at the same altitude, or in fact, what altitude they collided at. How had the Kazakh jet, which was supposed to be above the Saudi flight, ended up below it? Almost 2 weeks after the accident, Captain Ashok Verma joins investigators at the scene.
By that time, the operations for digging the Saudi cockpit had been completed. Whatever equipment was recoverable had been recovered.
Like the rest of the evidence uncovered so far, the instruments from the Saudi plane don't help explain what happened. The force of the crash has completely destroyed them.
I can't find anything. Too much damage.
I agree. Look at this.
We could hardly find any useful material.
With the disappointing discovery, investigators are forced to move on. They've learned all they can at the crash site. The case now depends on what they can find out from the black boxes. Investigators hope that somewhere on the cockpit recordings or buried in the flight data are the clues they need. Where were the planes when they collided? And how had they ended up on a deadly collision course?
Get to the 150! Just at the 140! Start the gun!
It's been 3 months since the mid-air collision of two passenger jets near New Delhi. Investigators have been frustrated by a lack of conclusive evidence. They hope the plane's black boxes will help them solve the case. In order to avoid any suggestion of bias, the boxes from the Saudi flight are being analyzed in England. Technicians from the Air Accidents Investigation Branch try to extract valuable data.
The neutrality of state where the recorders are handled was an essential thing.
Each plane was equipped with 2 black boxes, a flight data recorder and a cockpit voice recorder. The flight data recorder contains information on dozens of aspects of a plane's performance. Among them, the altitude, the airspeed, and the changes pilots make to the flight controls. The cockpit voice recorder picks up all the conversations in the cockpit.
279, good day.
As investigators try to learn more about the collision near New Delhi, they use the information stored on the black boxes to make a chronology of events. Peter Shepard is head of the recorder section of the Air Accidents Investigation Branch. He'll work backwards from the moment of impact.
The point of collision is reasonably well defined by rapid changes in parameters on each aircraft. If we make that our time zero point, we can then relate that to the individual times and build up a common time base.
First, Shepard and his team concentrate on the Saudi 747.
Saudi 763 approaching 140 for higher.
Roger, maintain flight level 140. Stand by for higher.
Saudi 763 will maintain 140.
The CVR reveals that the Saudi pilots received clear instructions about their altitude and seem to have understood them. after being told to hold at 14,000 feet. There was no discussion of climbing to a higher altitude, which would have taken them into the path of the Kazakh flight. Next, Shepard looks at the flight data recorder to confirm that the Saudi flight actually followed the instructions it was given.
The recorder from the Saudi flight showed us that the altitude had been normal during climb out.
The Saudi pilots leveled off at 14,108 feet, well within their safe corridor.
It had leveled at its assigned altitude of 14,000 feet and continued to fly level.
The Saudi pilots followed the ATC instructions meticulously, which is borne out by their confirmatory calls back to the ATC.
Air traffic controllers wanted the two planes separated by 1,000 feet and wanted the Saudi plane to fly below the Kazakh jet. If the Saudi pilots did nothing unusual, suspicion is growing that somehow it was the Kazakh plane that was in the wrong place. Alarmingly, when investigators examined the information from the Kazakh jet's flight data recorder, they discover that it descended far below the 15,000 feet it was supposed to stay at. Moments before the collision, the Kazakh plane is at 14,100 feet, almost 1,000 feet lower than its assigned altitude and less than 10 feet below the Saudi flight. It then powered directly into the Saudi jet.
The Kazakh crew had not stopped descending at the altitude they were cleared to, that was 15,000 feet.
But why had the Kazakh flight dropped so badly off course?
Kazakh 1907, report position.
Kazakhstan Airlines presents one theory for their plane's dramatic loss of altitude.
The Kazakhstan defense mainly relied on presence of turbulence.
Perhaps a sudden burst of turbulence had forced the plane lower. The data recorder of the Kazakh flight does seem to indicate that the crew had a bumpy ride. It shows two distinct and sudden drops of more than 400 feet. The airline claims both of these drops were caused by turbulence. But Peter Shepard isn't so sure.
When we saw the jumps of 250, 500 feet, our initial response was that these can't be right. I mean, it was the rate at which they changed was beyond that an aircraft could actually perform.
What else could cause the plane to drop so quickly? Or at least seem to drop so quickly? Shepard searches for an explanation.
We tried to resolve the inaccuracies in the Kazakh recording by looking at the other parameters that were recorded and trying to derive altitude using these other recordings.
It's intricate math. By using information including the speed and rate of descent from the flight data recorder, Shepard determines that the plane was on a steady downward approach. The reason for the apparent sharp drops is simple. Shepard learns that the sensor that sends altitude information to the flight data recorder was faulty. It would stick and temporarily stop sending information. When it got unstuck, it would wrongly appear as though the plane had lost considerable altitude.
It's as if there was a bit of glue on one area and it stuck in that. And eventually the altitude changed so much, the force on it made it jump again, and it stuck there for a little while.
Investigators can now conclusively dismiss turbulence as a factor in the collision.
So there's no sudden descent?
Scanning maintenance records, investigators also discover that there was no problem with the Kazakh plane's altimeters. They conclude that the difference found in the cockpit instruments was a result of the crash. It didn't cause it. To understand why the Kazakh plane kept descending after it was told to hold, investigators turn to the cockpit voice recorder. It begins long before the crash itself. Initially, there are no hints that anything is wrong.
Kazakh 1907. Report level passing.
Passing 240, Kazakh 1907.
Because the Ilyushin 76 is a modified military plane, it has another unusual feature, a position for a radio operator in the cockpit. Igor Rep mans that position and handles all communications for the Kazakh flight.
Roger. Over to Delhi approach 127.9.
127.9, bye-bye, Kazakh 1907.
As the aircraft nears the airport, Rep gets in touch with approach controller Dutta.
Delhi approach, good evening. Kazakh 1907. Passing 230 to 180.
I told Kazakh to descend and maintain flight level 150. That is 15,000 feet.
Roger, Kazakh 1907. Descend flight level 150. Report reaching.
1,000 feet vertical separation is sufficient, and that was granted to the two aircraft.
Kazakh 1907, now reach 150.
The Kazakhstan radio operator had at one time stated reaching flight level 150.
It's just 1 minute before the impact. And at this point, the Kazakh plane appears to be right where it's supposed to be, 1,000 feet higher than the Saudi plane. But investigators know that instead of leveling off, the plane continued to descend.
This is where the trouble starts.
As investigators compare the flight data information to the cockpit voice, they notice something disturbing.
Kazakh 1907, now reach 150.
When Rep calls out that they've descended to 15,000 feet, he's actually over 1,000 feet higher than he thinks he is. Investigators wonder how he could make such an enormous mistake. Why would he say he was at 15,000 feet, when in fact he was at 16,000? They consider the layout of the cockpit.
A radio operator does not have his independent altimeter. There are two metric altimeters fitted in front of, one each in front of the pilots. With some effort, the radio operator could also see this.
Whatever the reason, Rep is mistaken about his plane's height, and he's the only one in contact with the ground. Despite being told to remain at 15,000 feet, the plane continues to descend. As it does, Dutta issues a warning to the Kazakh pilots.
Identified traffic, 12 o'clock reciprocal, Saudi Boeing 747 and 10 miles. Likely to cross in another 5 miles. Report if in sight.
He tells them to watch out for the Saudi flight, but the Kazakh jet just keeps flying lower.
Ahead. Ahead.
Just before the crash, Igor Rep seems to have recognized that the plane is now flying dangerously low. But his warning doesn't come in time.
Keep the 150. Do not descend. Accelerate, Sanyo.
The cockpit voice recorder proves what investigators found in the flight data. At the time of the crash, the Kazakh jet was trying desperately to get back on course.
Get to the 150 and cruise at the 140. Stop the one!
But investigators are still puzzled. Why had the Kazakh plane kept descending?
After ruling out controller's error, ruling out the mechanical failure, do you have to go further into details of human behavior during the operation of a flight?
Kazakhstan is one of several now independent republics that used to be part of the Soviet Union. The national airline has a reputation at Indira Gandhi Airport.
There was always a sense that, these were small fly-by-night operators essentially doing the charter business, and they didn't necessarily follow the conventions of modern Western aviation.
We examined their background of knowledge of English language. The crew in the Soviet states, they pass English examination, but they're not fluent in spoken English.
Verma now listens more closely to the cockpit voice recorder. looking for an indication that the crew misunderstood their instructions. Had a language barrier caused the crash?
How many miles?
Traffic is at 8 miles, level 140.
Did the Kazakh pilots confuse their own altitude with that allocated to the Saudi aircraft?
Report, 8 miles.
Verma finds that members of this crew weren't communicating clearly with each other. Igor Rep was responsible for communication with the ground, but there's no indication that the pilot and co-pilot were listening to his instructions.
Switch on, engine inlet heating.
While the rest of the crew was busy discussing arrival procedures, Rep alone seemed to be occupied with their altitude.
Now looking, 1907.
It is a usual practice that the briefing for the arrival is completed before start of descent, so that all crew can pay full attention to the radio.
While the radio operator appears to have understood that the Saudi plane was at 14,000 feet, investigators believe the co-pilot thought that he was cleared to 14,000 feet and continued his descent.
Hold the level. What level were we given?
When the pilot does respond, he seems confused.
I think pilots did not pay that much attention and relied too much on the radio operator and to navigate the aircraft during this critical phase.
The decision to increase power and stop descending ends in tragedy.
Keep the 150. Do not descend. Accelerate, Sanya. Get to the 150 because at the 140. Stop the one!
The final report points a finger squarely at the crew of the Kazakh plane. In the wrong place at the wrong time. A simple misunderstanding led to the deaths of 349 people.
The investigation concluded that the primary cause of this Mayday collision was non-adherence to the authorized altitude allocated to the Kazakhstan aircraft.
Investigators are confident they know what caused the worst mid-air collision in aviation history. But there are steps they want the industry to take to help make Indira Gandhi Airport safer. What they find is that the technology that could have prevented this accident was already at the airport.
Saudi 763.
Investigators have determined that poor cockpit communication and a simple misunderstanding caused a devastating accident which killed almost 350 people. But technology existed that could have helped avoid this accident. Systems that would have helped both the pilots in the air and the controllers on the ground. Investigators are especially critical of the radar that was being used in New Delhi.
Air traffic controllers did rely on fairly outdated technology at that stage. There wasn't any secondary radar available at Delhi Airport. There was only an old primary radar.
Primary radar sends out radio signals to locate airplanes in the sky. The signal bounces off the plane and back to a dish on the ground. It reads a plane's position, but not its altitude.
The primary radar gives you a 2D picture.
Secondary radar works differently. A transponder aboard an aircraft sends a message to the ground with key information about the flight, including its altitude.
Saudi 763 approaching flight level 100.
Roger, climb, flight level 140.
On the day of the collision, approach controller VK Dutta could only rely on what the crews told him about their aircraft's altitudes.
Kazakh 1907, now reach 150.
The Kazakh radio operator said that they were flying at 15,000 feet, but Dutta had no way to confirm that. If he had known the Kazakh flight's actual altitude, he could have diverted the Saudi flight from its path.
That is the 3D picture. So you have some time to react to it. You can take the aircraft away.
At the time of the accident, India had ordered a $118 million air traffic control system with secondary radar and more sophisticated communications and navigational equipment. The system had originally been scheduled to be installed 2 weeks before the accident. But on the day of the crash, the system hadn't even been unpacked.
Secondary radar is an advancement on the primary radar. And in this particular case also, by getting the altitude information, it could have been possible that the accident of this nature could have been avoided.
In the year following the accident, there would be 3 near misses near Indira Gandhi Airport. It would take more than 2 years for the secondary radar system to be installed. Today, controllers at Indira Gandhi International Airport see an airplane's flight number, altitude, and heading. It's far more information than controller VK Dutta had available to him on the day of the accident. Experts believe another piece of technology could have helped prevent the collision: TCAS.
TCAS equipment generates caution and warnings for the crew. It allows them time to react, draws their attention to the situation around, and it looks into the vertical separation.
TCAS is a collision avoidance system that can be installed on board airliners. In many countries, the technology is mandatory. It alerts pilots when other flights are coming too close. The system also automatically tells them what evasive action they should take. Neither plane was equipped with TCAS. The Indian Airports Authority has also made the airport safer by redesigning the air corridors coming and going from the runways. At the time of the collision, there was one main air corridor for commercial planes landing and taking off from Indira Gandhi International Airport. With the increase in air traffic, that single corridor was becoming too crowded. In the wake of the accident, more air corridors were opened for commercial flights.
In general, aviation safety standards has improved. The concern for the safety has improved.
Out-of-date technology and poor communication led to this crash. But like almost every aviation accident, it was a chain of seemingly minor events that ended in disaster.
In retrospect, there were some very unlucky people to meet in the sky that night. You know, it's a 1 in a million chance for that to happen. Certainly, there were other things that could have helped: radar, collision avoidance systems, and I think we continue to make advances there. I don't worry about flying. Certainly, you know, destiny, I don't know. It was glad we weren't 5 minutes in front of where we were at, that's for sure.
VK Dutta went on to have a long career as an air traffic controller. Today, he works at a college training young controllers.
So I'm chief instructor there. So I'm training ATCUs. I'm addicted to my job. I love it. I really love it.
Dutta, who was initially suspected of having caused the crash, helped implement the changes to make New Delhi's airports safer. His efforts have paid off. The airport now handles 20 million passengers a year. Since the new radar system was installed and the new corridors opened, there hasn't been a fatal accident at this airport.